All right, so get ready because today we are going deep into Moorish Spain.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm talking about the stuff that'll make you rethink what you thought you knew about history.
It's really fascinating stuff.
We're going to be digging into historian Robin Walker's lecture from the Hidden Science Academy.
A great source.
And trust me, this is going to be a lot more interesting than your average history class.
Definitely.
So to kick things off, I've got to ask you, what was Europe like during the Dark Ages? While all this was happening in Spain.
Well, Walker starts by kind of turning the whole Dark Ages idea on its head.
Oh,
You see, while Europe was struggling, there was this vibrant civilization thriving in Spain.
you mean the Moors?
Exactly, the Moors.
And they were doing pretty well for themselves, huh?
Oh, way more than just pretty well. I mean, we're talking paved roads, sewage systems, streetlights.
Wow.
Cordoba even had public schools for both boys and girls by 950 AD.
Hold on. Cordoba had public schools in 950 AD.
Yeah.
I mean, what was the population of Cordoba back then?
About 1 million people.
1 million people.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously.
Seriously.
Were they all hanging out at those 900 public bars Walker talks about?
Well, probably not all of them.
Okay, go.
But, it does give you a sense of how sophisticated their society was.
I mean, that's mind-blowing.
And that's before we even get into their intellectual achievements.
Which I'm assuming we're going to get into.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so before we go any further, we've got to address the elephant in the room.
What's that?
Who were the Moors? I mean, it can't be that simple, right?
So we are right about that.
Because when I hear Moors, I immediately think of, race and religion.
Well, it's definitely not that straightforward.
Okay, so lay it on me.
Understand the Moors, we need to look at the bigger picture.
The history of North Africa.
Exactly.
Okay, so walk me through that.
So North Africa has this incredibly diverse history, right? You have wave after wave of different people and cultures interacting over centuries.
Okay, that makes sense.
Think about indigenous groups like the Cheon Berbers.
Oh, like the ones depicted in those amazing Sahara rock paintings.
You got it. Those rock paintings are like a direct link to ancient Africa.
I mean, they're mind-blowing.
They really are.
Just incredible.
Then on top of that, you have migrations and conquests from all sorts of groups.
Like who?
Well, you've got Sea Peoples, the Vandals, the Romans, the Arabs, and even later on, enslaved Europeans and Africans.
Wow, that's a lot of different influences.
It really is a melting pot, which makes defining more pretty tricky.
So how do we define more? I mean, where do we even begin?
Well, Walker argues that initially Moor was more of a geographical term.
Okay.
It simply referred to the people of Northwest Africa regardless of their specific ethnicity or religion.
So location-based, not race-based.
Right.
But that obviously changed over time.
Yeah, it did.
How so?
Well, as with a lot of these terms, Moor took on different meanings over time.
Like what?
Sometimes it was racial, sometimes it was religious, and a lot of times it was used interchangeably with other terms.
Like a Berber or Arab.
Exactly, or even Saracen, which can get super confusing.
No kidding. So how do we make sense of all this? I mean, where do we even start?
Well, Walker gives this really interesting example of a guy named Saint Benedict the Moor.
Okay.
He was actually born into slavery in Italy in the 16th century,
Right.
and his surname, the Moor, in Italian, directly translated to the black.
Oh, interesting.
Which shows that Moor wasn't always about religion.
So more about appearance in this case.
It seems that way.
Fascinating.
And Walker takes it a step further.
Ah,
He looks at the Spanish word morena,
okay.
and he dives deep into biblical translation.
Biblical translation?
Yeah, and he suggests that morena might actually mean shiny black.
Shiny black, not just brown.
Right.
I never would have thought of looking to the Bible to understand the Moors.
Well, language holds these fascinating clues to how people perceived the world back then,
Okay, that makes sense.
And there are other hints, too. Remember that Royal African Company crest we talked about a while back?
The one with the two figures as supporters.
That's the one.
Yeah, I remember.
And how they were described as two African blacks.
Right, two African blacks.
Well, Samuel Pepys, that famous diarist?
Oh, yeah.
He actually called them Moors in his diary entry from 1663.
So even back then, there was this blurring of the lines between Moors and African blacks.
Exactly.
It really makes you think about how much gets lost in translation over time.
It really does.
And you know what's even more interesting?
What's that?
There's scientific evidence that backs this up.
Oh, like what?
In 1992, there was a study done on the sickle cell trait in Portugal.
Okay.
And they found that the Binion haplotype...
Which is common in West Africa?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It was present in the Mediterranean basin between the 8th and 13th centuries.
Right in the heart of Moorish Spain.
Exactly. It's got to mean something, right?
Well, it definitely suggests a strong African presence in the region during that time period.
And Walker takes this even further.
Awesome.
He argues that while the Arabs definitely played a role in Moorish Spain,
Yeah.
he believes that the Islamic culture there was largely a Negro achievement.
Now, of course, we have to be careful with terms like Negro, recognizing that they're outdated and can be offensive.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Language evolves, and it's important to use terminology that is respectful and accurate.
Absolutely.
But the point is,
That the Moorish story is way more complex than we usually hear.
that's exactly right.
And I'm guessing it gets even more fascinating when we look at how they got to Spain in the first place.
Oh, you have no idea.
Okay, I'm ready. Tell me everything.
All right, so it all started back in the 8th century with a guy named Musa ibn Nusayr.
Okay.
He was the Arab governor of North Africa,
All right.
but it was actually his general, Tariq ibn Ziyad, who led the troops into Spain.
Okay, so Musa was the brains
Mhm.
and Tariq was the brawn.
Something like that.
Got it.
And get this, there's this account from a European monk who described these Moorish soldiers
Oh, yeah.
as having faces black as pitch. Oh, can you imagine what that sight must have been like for the Europeans?
Talk about making an entrance.
Right.
So they conquer Spain, but then what? I mean, it wasn't all smooth sailing after that, was it?
Not exactly. Well, the early years of Islamic rule in Spain were pretty unstable.
Oh, in what way?
Lots of internal conflicts, power struggles, the usual stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It wasn't really until a guy named Abd al-Rahman came along in 756 AD that things started to settle down.
And who was this Abel Rahman guy?
Well, he was of Yemeni and African descent, and he established the Umayyad dynasty.
Okay.
And that's when things really started to take off for Moorish Spain.
Like a golden age.
Yeah, you could say that.
So what made him such a great leader?
Well, for starters, he was a visionary.
Good.
He introduced new crops like sugarcane and cotton. He built sophisticated irrigation systems. He even implemented land surveying techniques.
Wow, this guy was ahead of his time.
He was.
But under his rule,
Yeah.
they were producing all sorts of stuff.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you name it, they were producing it. Silk, leather, ceramics, the works.
It sounds like he turned Spain into an absolute powerhouse.
He did.
So I'm guessing this was the peak of their influence.
It was definitely a high point.
But like all empires, they eventually weakened.
That's the way it goes, right?
What happened to the Umayyads?
Well, like I said, they eventually weakened, which paved the way for another dynasty to take over.
The Almoravids.
You got it.
Now, remind me, who are the Almoravids again?
Oh, they were a fascinating bunch.
In what way?
They originated from the Berber tribes down in Senegal.
Senegal,
Yeah,
as in Africa.
that's right.
I thought we were talking about Spain.
We are, but these guys came all the way from Senegal.
Hold on, all the way from Senegal to Spain.
Yeah.
That's some serious ambition.
It is.
And this was when...
This was in the 11th century, during the time when the ancient Ghana Empire ruled that region.
Okay, now my mind is officially blown.
And there's more.
Nor.
Their leader, Yusuf ibn Tashfin, he was said to resemble Mansa Musa,
Wait, as in Mansa Musa, the ruler of the Mali Empire.
the one and only.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
Talk about a legacy.
So how did these guys, the Almoravids, end up in Spain?
Well, Yusuf was a real unifying force.
Yeah.
He brought together all these diverse ethnic groups under his banner.
A real coalition builder.
Exactly.
Right.
And he led a super successful campaign against the Christian forces in Spain.
So they were a force to be reckoned with.
Oh, absolutely.
And did they just pick up where the Umayyads left off?
Pretty much.
So they basically took over all of Spain.
Well, they solidified Almoravid rule across this massive empire.
I mean, how big are we talking?
I'm talking Senegal to Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and of course, Spain.
That's huge.
It was a vast and powerful empire.
And were they just about military power?
Not at all.
What else did they bring to the table?
Well, for one thing, they introduced gold coinage to Europe.
Gold coinage.
Yeah.
And where did that gold come from?
Well, some historians believe it originated in West Africa.
Oh, wow.
You know the term guinea?
Yeah?
Some people think it's linked back to these Almoravid coins.
That's incredible.
It really shows how much of an impact they had, not just on politics and culture, but on economics as well.
So they were kind of a big deal.
They were.
But I'm guessing their reign didn't last forever.
You're catching on.
What happened?
Well, a few things.
Okay, like what?
They definitely had some internal conflicts, just like the Umayyads before them.
Yeah, that seems to be a recurring theme.
It is.
Okay.
And what else?
Well, at the same time, the Christian kingdoms in Spain were gaining power.
So the tides were starting to turn.
Exact.
And is there anything that really symbolizes this shift in power?
There is, actually. Check out the crest of the Kingdom of Aragon.
Okay, and what's so special about it?
Well, it depicts a Christian cross triumphing over 4 Moorish princes.
Okay, I get it. A pretty clear symbol of who's on top.
You could say that.
So what happened next? Well, that's where things get even more interesting.
Okay, I'm all ears.
But we'll have to save that for next time.
Oh, come on. You can't leave me hanging like that.
I know, but trust me, it's worth the wait.
All right,
I
fine.
won't be disappointed.
Okay, I'm holding to that.
You got it.
So, until next time, everyone, keep digging deeper, keep questioning everything, and we'll see you back here for part 2 of our deep dive into Moorish Spain.
See you then.
So last time, we left off with the Almoravids.
Oh, yeah.
They were starting to, lose their grip on power.
Right.
So who stepped in? Who filled that power vacuum?
Well, and another dynasty came onto the scene, the Almohads.
Okay, and remind me, where did they come from?
They also had roots in Africa.
Okay,
They emerged in the 12th century,
okay,
led by this religious reformer, Ibn Tumart.
okay.
And he was from the Mazmusa Berber tribe in Morocco.
And the Mazmusa Berbers, those were the ones described as blacks in the historical texts, right?
That's right.
So we're seeing this continuation of these African dynasties ruling over Spain.
Absolutely. And it's interesting.
What is it?
Even Lady Lugard, the one who came up with the name Nigeria,
Oh, yeah.
she was very clear about this in her writings.
What did she say?
She called the Almohads an African conquest and an African dynasty.
It's amazing how these connections are woven throughout history.
It really is.
But what set the Almohads apart? I mean, what was their legacy?
They were known for their beautiful architecture.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, one example is the Koutoubia Mosque in Marrakesh.
Oh, wow. I've seen pictures of that.
It's still standing today,
Yeah.
a testament to their skill.
Incredible.
Under their rule, Seville also became this thriving city
Okay.
with stunning gardens, grand buildings, and a population of almost 500,000 people.
Wow, 500,000. That's almost as big as Cordoba was back in its prime.
It was a major urban center.
So they were patrons of the arts and architecture.
Oh, definitely.
But there's got to be more to their story, right?
There is.
What is it?
There's this other aspect of their influence that often gets overlooked.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Their indirect contribution to the European Renaissance.
Hold on, how did they contribute to the Renaissance? I thought they were in Spain.
They were, but remember those translation houses we talked about?
The ones where scholars were translating Arabic texts into Latin?
Exactly.
Yeah, they were popping up all over Europe.
Right, spreading knowledge from the Islamic world.
Okay, so how does this tie back to the Almohads?
Well, by the 12th and 13th centuries, all these translation efforts, they really fueled the growth of major European universities.
Like Bologna, Paris, Oxford, Cambridge.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm starting to see the connection here.
And those universities, they were the seeds of the Renaissance.
So the Almohads, by supporting knowledge and scholarship.
They indirectly contributed to one of the most significant periods of European history.
That's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
It highlights how interconnected everything is. But of course, even the Almohads, they weren't the final chapter in the Moorish story.
Right, there was still one more dynasty, the Nasrids,
You got it.
who ruled the Kingdom of Granada.
Yes, the Nasrids, famous for the Alhambra.
Ah, the Alhambra.
Have you ever been?
It's on my bucket list for sure.
The pictures don't do it justice.
It looks incredible.
It is a masterpiece.
So tell me about the Nasrids. How were they different from the previous dynasties?
Well, unlike the Umayyads and the Almoravids, the Nasrids, they actually had more Arab than African roots.
Okay, so a bit of a shift in the ethnic makeup of the ruling class.
You could say that their founder, Muhammad I, he was known as Al-Ahmar,
Which means,
the red one,
interesting.
probably because of his fair skin and hair.
So a different look from the previous rulers
Right, but like many ruling dynasties, they used strategic marriages.
to maintain power.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
So over time, their lineage became more mixed.
Okay.
Evidence suggests a significant African influence in later generations.
It's always more complicated than it seems at first glance, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But sadly, even Granada, the last bastion of Moorish rule, it couldn't hold out forever.
You're right.
What happened?
In 1492, Ferdinand and Isabella, they conquered Granada.
What a turning point in history.
It marked the end of over 700 years of Moorish presence in Spain.
I can't imagine it was a happy ending for the Moors.
It wasn't.
What happened to them?
Well, Abu Abdullah, known as Boabdil in European accounts.
The last Nasrid ruler.
Yes, he was forced into exile.
Exile.
Yeah, and he and his mother, they're still remembered today.
How so?
Well, there's this modern Spanish ritual.
Are you talking about the one with those giant puppets?
Yeah, the ones depicting Boabdil, his mother, and the Catholic monarchs.
I've seen pictures of that. It's pretty
It's
intense.
visually striking,
Yeah.
but it tends to romanticize and oversimplify what was a very complex and tragic event.
Yeah, it's a reminder that history is often told from the victor's perspective. But Boabdil's exile, that wasn't an isolated incident, was it?
Sadly, no.
What happened?
Ferdinand and Isabella, driven by religious zeal, they initiated a mass expulsion of Moors from Spain.
A mass expulsion. Wow, that's not something you hear about very often.
It was a major turning point.
That must have been devastating.
It was.
How many Moors were expelled?
Well, Professor Lane Poole estimated that 3 million Moors were banished from Spain between the fall of Granada and the early 17th century.
3 million. That's incredible.
Imagine the impact of that on a civilization that had thrived for centuries.
It's hard to even fathom.
It really is a dark chapter in history.
It's a reminder of the dangers of intolerance and how easily things can go wrong.
It's a lesson we should never forget.
So we've talked about the political and social upheaval. But what about the intellectual side of things? I mean, earlier you mentioned that Moorish Spain was this beacon of learning during the European Dark Ages.
Right.
What were they doing that was so groundbreaking?
Well, picture this. Cordoba was this bustling center of scholarship. Libraries overflowing with books.
Wow.
We're talking tens of thousands of books being produced every year, all beautifully handwritten and bound.
That's incredible.
Even servants were considered more valuable if they could read.
A society that truly valued literacy.
Exactly.
I mean, it really challenges those stereotypes about non-European cultures during that time.
It does.
So where were they getting all this knowledge from?
Well, they were embracing knowledge from all over.
Okay.
Translating texts from Greek, Latin, Persian, Indian traditions, you name it.
Wow. They weren't just absorbing knowledge, they were adding to it.
Exactly. They were building on it, innovating, making their own discoveries.
Okay, so give me some examples. What were some of their major contributions?
Well, their contributions were significant, particularly in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy.
Okay, let's start with math. What do they do there?
Well, for instance, they introduced Europe to the concept of zero.
Zero.
Yeah, and the decimal system.
Wait a minute, are you saying we have the Moors to thank for basic math concepts like that?
Pretty much.
I never realized how much we owe to them.
It's pretty remarkable.
Okay, what about astronomy? What were they doing there?
Remember El-Idrisi, that scholar we mentioned earlier?
The one who talked about the Earth being round.
That's the one.
Yeah, what about him?
Well, he created this incredibly detailed map of the world.
A map of the world back then.
Yeah, incorporating knowledge from all sorts of sources.
That's incredible.
It demonstrated an advanced understanding of geography that was way ahead of its time.
He sounds like a brilliant mind.
He was.
Okay, so math, astronomy. What about medicine? Did they make any advancements there?
Oh, absolutely. Moorish physicians, they were renowned throughout Europe for their skills.
Okay.
They established hospitals with specialized wards,
Wow.
developed advanced surgical techniques, and even wrote comprehensive medical textbooks.
So they weren't just practicing medicine, they were documenting it and passing that knowledge on.
Exactly.
That's crucial.
They played a key role in preserving those classical medical texts from ancient Greece and Rome.
So that knowledge didn't get lost during the European Dark Ages.
Right, they were real guardians of knowledge.
It sounds like they touched every aspect of society.
They did.
From science and medicine to agriculture and technology.
And yet, despite all of this, their legacy is often downplayed or even erased from history books.
A real shame.
It's a reminder of how important it is to challenge the traditional narratives and give credit where credit is due.
Well, speaking of giving credit, Professor Lane Poole, who we mentioned earlier, he really lamented the decline of Spain after the expulsion of the Moors.
He did.
What did he say?
He talked about how Spain went from this vibrant center of learning to a place where scientific discoveries were seen as a threat to religious beliefs.
It's a sad irony.
It is.
They benefited so much from Moorish knowledge, and yet they ultimately turned against them.
It's a complex issue with roots in religious intolerance, political power struggles, and the rise of European colonialism.
Yeah, it's a reminder of the dangers of prejudice and how easily we can lose sight of the value of other cultures.
And how that loss can set us back as a society.
You know, it's interesting that Walker brings up the 19th century debate about the Negro question.
The one questioning the intellectual capabilities of people of African descent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he points out how John Stuart Mill, that prominent philosopher,
Right.
used the achievements of ancient Egypt and Moorish Spain to directly challenge those racist notions.
It's amazing how history can be used to fight prejudice and ignorance.
The Moorish story completely dismantles those ideas of white racial superiority.
It does.
It shows how interconnected we are as a species.
Exactly.
And how much we've all benefited from the contributions of diverse cultures.
That's the beauty of history, isn't it? It opens our minds to new possibilities and helps us understand the world in a deeper way.
I'm starting to see how the Moorish story isn't just about a distant historical period.
It's about us. It's about the present. It's about understanding who we are as a global society.
It has so much relevance to contemporary issues of race, culture, and the legacy of colonialism.
It really makes you think about how history is told, whose voices are amplified, and whose contributions are valued.
It's definitely making me question a lot of the assumptions I've held about history and culture.
That's the power of really digging deep into these subjects. We start to see the world with new eyes.
Okay, I have to ask, we can't talk about Moorish Spain without mentioning the Alhambra.
You're absolutely right. It's an architectural marvel.
It really is.
A testament to the artistic brilliance and craftsmanship of the Nasrid dynasty.
I've seen pictures, and it's breathtaking.
It looks like something out of a fairy tale.
It does.
It's more than just a palace.
Okay, what is it?
It's this complex of buildings, gardens, and courtyards,
Wow.
all blended together in this amazing fusion of Islamic, Moorish, and Andalusian architectural styles.
So many different influences.
You've got intricate geometric patterns, delicate calligraphy, serene fountains, all designed to create an atmosphere of tranquility and beauty.
It sounds magical.
It is.
No wonder it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
And one of the most visited places in Spain.
It's incredible to think that it was built during the reign of the last Moorish dynasty in Spain, even as their power was waning.
It's a powerful symbol of their resilience and creativity, a legacy that continues to inspire awe and wonder.
You're making me want to book a trip to Spain right now.
I understand that feeling.
But before I do, there's one more aspect of the Moorish legacy we need to explore.
Okay, what's that?
Their impact on European thought and the transmission of knowledge.
Ah, yes, that's a fascinating topic.
I'm ready to dive in. Tell me everything.
Ah.
Okay, so we've established that Moorish Spain wasn't just surviving, they were thriving intellectually while Europe was, in the Dark Ages.
Yeah, it's almost like they held the torch of knowledge during that time.
So how did that knowledge eventually make its way back into Europe?
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
It is.
And the answer is it's multifaceted.
Okay.
Moorish scholars, they didn't just hoard knowledge.
Right.
They actively translated texts from ancient Greece and Rome, making them available to European scholars.
So they were kind of like the middlemen.
You could say that. They were the bridge between the classical world and the Renaissance.
So the Renaissance didn't just appear out of nowhere.
Exactly.
It had these deep roots in Moorish Spain.
It did.
That's incredible.
And we see that influence in so many areas, from philosophy and science to art and architecture.
Yeah.
Walker talks about these centers of learning popping up in Christian Europe around the 10th century.
Oh, yeah.
Places like Barcelona, Toledo, and Leon,
Okay.
specifically to translate Arabic texts into Latin.
I mean, it reminds me of that incredible House of Wisdom in Baghdad.
Another great example.
Yeah, another center of learning during the Islamic Golden Age.
You're right, there were these complex networks of scholarship and exchange happening across the Islamic world.
Okay.
And Moorish Spain was a key player.
It's amazing.
It really challenges that idea that Europe was the only source of intellectual progress.
Yeah, it's like we've been told a very narrow version of history.
It is, one that leaves out all these amazing contributions from other cultures. That's why it's so important to dig deeper, to question those dominant narratives,
For sure.
and to recognize the contributions of diverse cultures.
Absolutely. So are you ready to dive into some specific examples of this knowledge transfer?
Let's do it.
Okay, hit me with your best shot.
All right, let's start with philosophy.
Okay.
Have you heard of the Moorish scholar Averroes?
Averroes.
His Arabic name was Ibn Rushd.
Okay.
He wrote these in-depth commentaries on Aristotle's works
Okay.
that had a huge impact on European thinkers,
Like who?
including Thomas Aquinas.
Thomas Aquinas, the heavyweight of Catholic philosophy.
That's the one.
You're telling me he was influenced by a Moorish scholar?
He was. Aquinas actually incorporated some of Averroes' ideas into his own writings.
No.
It shows how Islamic thought found its way into Christian theology.
It's pretty remarkable.
It really is a great example of that cross-cultural exchange.
Yeah, it makes you realize that knowledge has a way of transcending borders and religious boundaries. So what about the hard sciences? Did those Moorish advancements in math, astronomy, and medicine make their way into Europe too?
Oh, absolutely.
How so?
Those translation centers we talked about earlier, they played a crucial role.
Yep.
European scholars could access Arabic texts on all sorts of subjects.
They were like the key.
Yeah, for instance, the works of Al-Khwarizmi.
Al-Khwarizmi.
He was a Persian mathematician,
Okay.
and his works introduced the concept of algebra to Europe.
Algebra, yeah, that rings a bell.
And his name, Al-Khwarizmi, is actually where we get the word algorithm.
No way. In that fundamental concept we use in computer science today originated in the Islamic world.
It did. Another powerful example of how knowledge travels across time and cultures, evolving and adapting along the way.
My mind is blown.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is. So what about medicine? Did Moorish medical practices influence Europe as well?
They did, in some pretty significant ways.
Okay, like what?
Moorish physicians introduced new surgical techniques, herbal remedies, and a more holistic approach to healthcare.
Holistic, huh?
Yeah, they emphasized hygiene, diet, and even the importance of mental well-being.
That sounds very forward-thinking.
It does, doesn't it?
Almost modern in a way.
It's fascinating how many of their ideas align with current trends in health and wellness.
So it wasn't just a one-way flow of knowledge from Moorish Spain to Europe?
You got it. It was a dynamic exchange, a conversation, a process of mutual influence.
A back and forth.
Exactly. European scholars, they built upon and expanded upon Moorish knowledge, adapting it to their own context.
So it's like a tapestry,
I like that.
woven with threads from different cultures,
Yeah,
creating this beautiful and complex whole.
that's a great analogy, and that tapestry, it extends beyond Europe.
Oh, how so?
Moorish influence reached other parts of the world through trade routes and intellectual networks.
So it's not just a European story.
It's a global story.
It is.
Their impact resonates around the world,
Wow.
highlighting the interconnectedness of human civilizations and the enduring power of ideas.
It makes you wonder what other hidden legacies of the Moors are still out there waiting to be discovered.
That's the question, isn't it?
It is.
It encourages us to stay curious, to keep exploring, and to always question those narratives we're given.
Always be questioning.
Exactly.
Well, this has been incredible. We've journeyed through centuries, uncovering this often overlooked story of Moorish Spain.
We have.
We've seen their rise and fall, their incredible intellectual and cultural achievements, and their lasting impact on Europe and the world.
It's a story that deserves to be told.
It does. From the bustling streets of Cordoba to the majestic Alhambra,
Two incredible places.
their legacy is a testament to human creativity, resilience, and the pursuit of knowledge.
It really is.
And their story, it's a powerful reminder
It is.
of the interconnectedness of human civilizations,
That's right.
the importance of embracing diversity,
Absolutely.
and the need to challenge narratives that erase or diminish the contributions of marginalized cultures.
It's a message that's more relevant than ever.
It is, well, this deep dive has been truly eye-opening.
It has been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on this journey.
And thank you for listening. We hope this has sparked your curiosity to learn more about the Moors and their enduring legacy.
And remember, history isn't just about the past,
It's about understanding our present.
and shaping a more inclusive and informed future.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.
See you then.